couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Okay, my watch says 1 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everybody who's joined. And for those of you who haven't done one of these before, just a couple notes. If you can't hear me or you have a question, please put that in the chat. I have the chat window up so I can see your questions come in as you have them, or if you have any problems hearing something, or if I share a video, if you're having problems with that as well. But so far they seem to have worked pretty well for us. So we'll just see how we do. So for those of you who haven't done one yet, my name is Emily Davenport. I work for the University of Georgia in the Marine Science Department, and I'm part of a group called ECOGIG. ECOGIG is a group that was funded after the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So we do a lot of research in the Gulf of Mexico, and we look at the impacts of the oil spill on that ecosystem. But I also just share general ocean topics with people. And one of my favorite things to share with people is the deep sea. So today I'm going to share with you guys a little bit about how do deep sea animals survive. Last week, I talked about some interesting deep sea stuff, and the week before, or either the week before or earlier in the week, things are starting to all blur together for me. I also shared about how we explore the deep sea. And so if you guys are interested in tuning into those, if you weren't here for those live, they all live on YouTube. And near the end of this presentation, I'll share the link. So you can go back and watch those, because I do share more stuff and answer some deep sea questions. But one question that came up in one of the webinars was, how do animals live in the deep sea? The deep sea is a challenging place to live. So today, let's talk a little bit about that. So just to give you a little background, what is the average depth of the ocean? That's a question that comes up a lot. It's about 12,000 feet or 2.3 miles. So if you were to take all the different depths that exist in the ocean and take an average, it would be about 2.3 miles deep. But the deepest point in the ocean, because not the whole ocean is not the same depth, is called the Challenger Deep. It's about 36,000 feet deep, which is almost 7 miles. And where is it? It is in the Western Pacific Ocean, in the southern end of the Mariana Trench. So that's a big, long trench that runs through the ocean. It's super deep. There's a really cool not infographic, but video that I shared a couple webinars back about how deep is the ocean. And it kind of shows how deep the Mariana Trench is, in particular Challenger Deep. And you can turn Mount Everest upside down into into Challenger Deep and still not be at the bottom of the bottom of Challenger Deep. So very, very, very deep. And who discovered this? You might think that it was in the last 100 years, maybe less than that because of all the new technology we have. But actually, they were researchers aboard the HMS Challenger in 1875 is when they discovered this super deep place in the ocean. That is very cool, a very long time ago. And they actually did this by using a weighted line. So that is a lot of rope, 7 miles of rope, and it was marked at 25 fathom intervals, which 1 fathom equals 6 feet. So they just lowered that rope down until it hit the bottom, and they figured it out. Very cool. To date, there have only been 4 people ever to reach the bottom of Challenger Deep or get close to the bottom anyway. So it's pretty cool that in 1875 they figured out how deep it was. So much of the marine life that we know about, that we're familiar with, lives above 200 meters. So about 600 feet and above is where we see most of the marine life. And then below that, we're in the mesopelagic zone, which is also known as the twilight zone. So there's not very much sunlight. There becomes more and more pressure on an animal living in that zone or below the 200 meters, because the deeper you go, the more water pressure there is. And then once you pass the 800 to 1,000 meter depth, there's no sunlight at all. So it just becomes a lot more challenging to live in that type of environment. So these are the different zones, just real briefly. You can look this up on the internet as well, but there's the epipelagic, which is the sunlight zone, mesopelagic, the twilight zone, and then after that, all these zones, there is no more sunlight. There's the midnight zone, the abyss, and then the different zones or the different depths, but there's the trenches, the hadopelagic as well. So you can see the ocean is very deep in some places, and some other places it's not. Okay, so the average ocean temperature, here's another challenge that animals encounter, is 34 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's about the average temperature of your refrigerator. So if you're going to live in the deep sea, you have to be okay with living in cold temperatures. The average pressure in the deep sea is 40 to 100 times the pressure of Earth's atmosphere. So imagine a force pushing on your body between 40 to 100 times more than what you're experiencing right now, just sitting in your living room or in your bedroom, wherever you are right now. That's why we can really only dive to certain depths in the ocean, because below, and by dive I mean humans in a scuba suit, because below, if we keep going deeper and deeper, we'll be crushed by the amount of pressure pushing on our bodies. So originally people thought life can't survive without light. And we now know that's not true. After exploring the deep sea, that there are quite a few creatures that thrive in this extreme environment. So in a place that is cold, it has high pressure, and there is no sunlight. So how has life adapted to these extreme conditions? So again, I've talked about, there's some challenges. No light, high pressure, low temperatures. There's also very little food because there's not quite as much life as we might see on land or in the shallower waters of the ocean. And sometimes that, there might be food that falls from the surface to the bottom. But it's just harder to find food in the deep sea because there's just a lot of the ocean. And when you're swimming around in the dark, sometimes it's hard to find your food. Um, and so there are challenges to that as well. You can't see to hunt, like I just said. You can't see predators, so you can't swim away maybe if you can't see what's coming after you. Okay, so whoops, ruined that one. All right. So the first thing that I want to talk about is low light. Um, so if there's little to no light in the deep sea, one adaptation animals have come up with is just to have really big eyes. So the bigger your eyes, the more you can kind of take in. So this super creepy looking guy is a hatchetfish, and they have these really big eyes that collect any light that it happens to be in their environment so that they can see. They also the eyeballs point in the upward direction so they can see what's above them, because if there's any sunlight filtering down, then they're going to catch it with their eyes. And you can also see this fish has its mouth pointed in the upward direction as well, and its teeth actually point back into towards its mouth. So any food it catches it has a hard time escaping because the teeth kind of act like a little trap in their mouth and keep the prey in. Um, so this is another animal that has that weird adaptation. There are a lot of animals in the deep sea that have these really big eyes. This one in particular is very strange to me. It is called a barreleye fish. The top part of its head is actually clear. So you can see this top part of it is see-through. And then these round balls inside are its eyes, not the things in the front that look like where the eyes should be. The eyes are actually inside, and they can move them around, and they point them upwards a lot through their see-through head, so that they can see what's above them, what's coming. If there's any light filtering down from above, they're going to pick it up. And they do live in the deep sea, so they might be catching light from animals that are making their own light, which we'll talk more about in a little bit in this presentation. So that's one weird adaptation. Another thing that animals do is to have a red body color. So red light just can't penetrate the ocean, or it can't penetrate water very far. It's one of the first colors to disappear as light goes into water. So animals that live in the deep sea or in that twilight zone where there might be a little bit of light, they are red, so that it actually appears black, and predators can't see them as well. So you will see a lot of deep sea creatures that have a red color because of that. Like this beautiful little octopus. Actually, that's a squid, I think. That beautiful squid there. And then another weird thing in the deep sea, and this isn't really an adaptation that we know the explanation for. This is more of like, whoa, that's crazy, is gigantism. So scientists believe this is due to living in the deep sea, but they're still trying to figure out exactly why this happens. So a lot of deep sea creatures tend to be really big in comparison to their shallow water components. So this is a deep sea isopod. It is related to the like roly-polies you might find out in your garden. And those are teeny. The roly-polies are like the size of your fingernail. This is they also have there are ones that live in the sea as well in shallow water. This little guy here on the right is a shallow water isopod. There are a lot of different isopods that live on our planet, but ones that we find in the deep sea get really big. You can see this person is holding it. They weigh about the same as a small dog, and we have no idea why they are this big. So let me show you a video about a few other things that get really big just in the deep sea. If I can get it to play. Here we go. Okay, so that just gave you a few more examples of animals that get very large only in the deep sea. One idea might be that there's so much pressure pushing on them that they can grow bodies that are that just wouldn't work on in shallow water, because the pressure kind of helps support that body plan in the deep sea more than it would in the shallow water. But there hasn't been really a good explanation exactly as to why the animals get that big, especially because like an isopod or like the giant crab that they showed, those are both a hard-shelled creature. So and their shallow water components are similar body plans, hard shells. So that logic may fall apart there. But anyway, just kind of a fun, interesting, weird thing that happens in the deep sea that I like to share. Okay, nope, not watching the video again. All right, so again, another adaptation, because of the high pressure, a lot of creatures lack lungs or any sort of gas-filled spaces that would make them more susceptible to harm in the intense pressures of the deep sea. So like this is a sea cucumber. And it's kind of like a gelatinous blob. You see a lot of gelatinous kind of creatures with no air pockets in their bodies. A lot of like shallow water fish have swim bladders that are filled with air that they can kind of adjust the amount of air inside them to help them maintain their buoyancy in the water. You don't see that in deep sea fish because as a deep sea fish might go up higher into the water and have less pressure on it, that swim bladder would expand and contract with the pressure, and it could expand too much and explode and hurt the fish. So often deep sea fish don't have any sort of air filled cavities. A lot of like whales and things like that that might be deep divers also don't have like air filled places in their body. There might be oil inside those places instead, um, because air, again, as it has more or less pressure on it, it expands and contracts, and you wouldn't want it to expand and then explode. So that's usually why there's no air or gas filled spaces. So like this is the blobfish. Now, you might not have seen a picture of the blobfish looking like this. I bet all of you have seen the blobfish in its normal state, or in its most widely shared around the internet state, which I'll show in just a minute. But this is what the blobfish looks like in real life, or in the deep sea. It looks just like a normal fish. It's not super good looking, but it's not quite as ugly as some people have made it out to be. And so this fish lives in the deep sea. It lives at a super high pressure. They don't have that air-filled swim bladder. And so they're mostly just kind of like a blobby thing, a blobby fish. And so when you pull it up to the surface, because there's not so much pressure acting on it, it looks like this. And so it's kind of sad. So the pressure is actually like working to push that fish together and make it look like a normal fish. So when you pull it up, it looks really sad. A lot of deep sea creatures, if you pull them to the surface, they don't survive just because they need to live at that high pressure, and their bodies, things go wrong when they come all the way up to the surface. So this is a dead blobfish, but he's very sad looking. Okay, so again, like I mentioned before, food scarcity is a problem in the deep sea. there is a lot of deep sea around because the deep sea is actually the largest environment on our planet. It's all very dark. It's just harder to find food. The animals there are definitely finding the food because they are living and thriving down there, but they have evolved these weird ways of capturing prey. So like this fish is a gulper eel. I talked a little bit about this guy a couple presentations ago, but I have a fun video to show you guys. So this gulper eel has a really big hinged jaw, and then it has a stomach that can expand really big, so it can just eat like a really big piece of food and keep it in its stomach and digest it slowly. And then also you can kind of see these sharp pointy teeth. A lot of times the teeth are angled backwards, again, to keep the prey in their mouth and stomach. So let me show you this video.
Yeah, there's something dark over to the left hand side, sort of in the center. It's moving along there.
Over here on the left hand side of your screen.
This thing here. Can we take a look at that?
What is that? Oh, wow.
Looks like a Muppet.
What are you?
What is
It's
that?
like a, huh.
Oh, it's a
It's
fish.
defensive.
Oh, it's in the water column. Isn't
That's
that
a
what it is?
fish?
What? I don't know.
What? Wow.
It looks like it.
Is it engorged or is it like that?
Is it mad?
Yeah.
Touch
Is
it.
it just?
Look!
Oh
my
my
god!
God. Look at
Oh
that.
my
Wow.
goodness.
Look at his
Oh my god!
It's kind of like googly eyes.
I think he ate too much.
Yeah.
He's full.
Wow.
Wow.
We really ticked him off.
Uh-oh.
Whoa,
What?
Are those like the gill arches? The gill?
Some kind of...
What is it?
Whoa. Wow. It just got so big.
It's all bladder.
Oh my god.
That's his defense. Like, let me
Oh,
blow
yeah.
up so I can show him how big I am.
Incredible.
Wow.
Yep, he's doing the shake.
What's a
Oh my god.
Yes.
Is that a gulper eel then?
Wow.
Yes.
So yeah, that is crazy.
That
That
was
That
awesome.
was awesome. What a way to end the watch, right?
Yeah,
Right.
All right, so that was Nautilus Live, which if you go to their website, nautiluslive.org, here at the bottom of the video, you can see more videos. And once they start exploring this summer, they will be live streaming all of their ROV dives. So you might get to see something cool like that. And you can see how excited those scientists got to see that gulper eel, which is a weird creature. Very cool to be able to see what it can do with those big hinged jaws and expandable stomach. Super cool. Okay. So here's another weird deep sea fish. This is a viper fish. You can see it's very long pointy teeth. There's no way anything that gets in that creature's mouth is coming back out. So a lot of deep sea creatures have these sharp pointy teeth that keep their prey in their mouth. All right, next up. So a lot of creatures have to be adapted to temperature. There are most of the deep sea is cold, but there are often places like these hydrothermal vents where geothermally heated water gets released into the deep sea. So these hydrothermal vents can release water that is 700-800 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's boiling hot. And that doesn't seem like a really great place to live, but actually life thrives at these hydrothermal vents. Not in that 700-800 degree water, but just next to it, where it might be like the temperature of a nice warm bath. And a lot of animals do really well there, so they actually seek out these vents to live on. And you can see anywhere where these red dots are, these are where hydrothermal vents exist on our planet. So you can see they are occurring along the plates of the Earth, where there is spreading or some subduction or anything like that, any tectonic stuff happening where those two plates are meeting together is usually where you're going to find a hydrothermal vent, also known as an underwater volcano. And you can see they occur all over our planet. This is a hydrothermal vent from the Gulf of California. You can see that it is covered in life. So this shiny stuff up here in the top left, that is the hot water that's coming out of the vent. That was measured to be like around 700 degrees Fahrenheit. All of these little red dots all over the vent, those are scale worms. So those are a worm that's living on the vent. All of the white and purple, kind of gray purple, fluffy-ish stuff. I think there's some orange and pink. That's all bacteria that's living on the rocks. And then these white tubes, those are a kind of tube worm that also lives only on hydrothermal vents. They have to live on these vents. That's where they have a special bacteria that live inside their body that takes the chemicals from the vent and turns it into food for them. So they live on these vents. And I think they like the warm water that they're getting from the vent as well. They don't do as well in the cold, deep sea water, but these vents make a nice warm spot to live. So you can see that animals are living and thriving on these kinds of systems. Here's another interesting adaptation that animals have come up with in the deep sea. So I'm going to show you this video. This is from Nautilus Live again that I showed you just a little bit before, the gulper eel. So one thing, and these are all deep sea octopus, and they're actually brooding eggs in crevices in the seafloor where hydrothermally heated fluid is seeping out. So the water that is coming out from these cracks is warmer than the seawater above them. So they've figured this out, and they laid their eggs here, and now they're sitting on them and protecting them. So I will show you this video because it's very cool. They just discovered this in 2018. So in the last 2 years, scientists had no idea that these octopus were doing this before they discovered them. And this species of octopus is normally a solitary octopus. They don't live together in groups, but you will see in this video, there are literally thousands of them grouped together. It is very cool. So just watch. All of these white looking things are octopus.
Little spiral snail shells.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's some
there's
eggs.
my
A lot of eggs.
That in the
Oh, wow.
center one.
Yeah.
It's moving its tentacles a lot.
Yeah, let's get a shot of that
Let's get
too.
yeah.
Let me get a little bit. See what happens.
This is great.
Oh, yep. She has eggs.
Oh yeah,
Is this enough octopus for you, Joe?
I could not have asked for.
Look how shiny
more.
those eggs are.
Yeah. This is very interesting.
So I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but are these likely male or female doing the brooding?
Likely female.
You know, it's not every octopus is in this position. There was one that was just went out of view below. That's out and facing outwards with tentacles extended. But the majority that we've been seeing in this area are in what looks to be a brooding pose.
Steve, can you take stills? Or are you just doing video and then pull the stills afterwards?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the process is for pulling stills, but not from this desk here.
And then there's an octopus that's settling
I
down.
take screenshots for stills while we're sampling, and also whenever we see anything interesting, and also just occasionally to show the landscape of what we're passing over.
So there's like 3 rivers flowing into this one here, 3 rivers of octopus.
If anyone even detects a little bit of a shimmer anywhere, we should try and push in and look. Andrew just entered.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
notice it
good
from the
idea,
right-hand
Jeff.
side
Yeah, that barren side maybe.
Yeah.
on that little barren spot. If you guys are okay with it.
Yeah. There's still a bunch of gastropods over there, even where there aren't a lot of octopus.
It's a cool
What's
shot.
the goal here? Do you want me to just land and take a bunch of pictures?
It's kind of in front below you. You're going to pan over.
Yeah, there we
Okay,
go.
there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're talking about the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look at all the anemones in this
Yeah.
one.
Oh, this has a lot of anemones. Wow.
Yeah.
Those ones vertical on the wall are pretty cool.
Like zoom in and see if there's any more shimmer over there.
Yep.
Oh, look at
Oh, yeah.
shimmer.
We got the shimmer.
Interesting. Coming to try to.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
look at that.
That seems more prominent than the
Oh,
last
yeah.
location.
What's your do you have any temperature
My goodness.
reading different?
Still saying 1.7.
1.7.
Yeah.
All right.
1/10 of a degree.
That's
Wow.
really, really cool.
Look at all the anemones on the rocks.
Yeah, more gastropods.
Tons
more,
of gastropods.
Just off to the bottom. That's weird.
What? Where?
Oh, we can pan to it later. It
Okay.
was south or below the camera right now. Yeah, look at that.
Well, this has definitely generated some excitement. We've got over 15 countries, hundreds of viewers tuning in right now, watching this live with us. It's pretty amazing.
We're happy to have you here, and you're getting some of these last shots before we have to start to recover vehicles. But you can just see octopus, lines of octopus snaking up this formation of volcanic rock.
Okay, I got you in the camera.
Oh, there's that.
Butt cam.
Right. So the shimmer that they were looking for was that warm water seeping out through those cracks in the seafloor, and they did see it. So this is one of only 2 examples in the deep sea of animals that incubate their eggs in hydrothermal fluid. There are also deep sea skates, which is like kind of related to like a stingray. They also do this. They lay their eggs in hydrothermal fluid. And before that, we really didn't think any animal did that. And now we've discovered 2 of them in the same year. In fact, it's both discovered by Nautilus Live. So again, when they go live with their expeditions, you guys need to tune in and watch because they always find the coolest stuff. Okay, so moving on. And then, okay, so last week I talked a little bit about chemosynthesis. And if you want to go back and watch a whole webinar just on chemosynthesis, please do. Please go to our YouTube channel, which I'll share at some point during this presentation. But I'll just briefly go over that again. It occurs in many deep sea environments near hydrothermal vents, cold seeps, which are places where oil and gas seep out of the seafloor, brine pools, anywhere where you see a bunch of life that is living and thriving without sunlight, there's usually chemosynthesis involved. And I did just see someone raise their hand. If you can open the chat and pop your question in there, it's easier for me to see. Please feel free to ask any questions along the way. I will try and get to them as I see them. So, okay, here is the link to watch the webinar about chemosynthesis. It's youtube.com/ECOGIG.ORG EPO. That's our YouTube channel. Please go there, subscribe, check out all of our videos. All of these webinars are going to be streamed. Or all of these webinars will live there. It's actually streaming live there right now. So please feel free to check out the chemosynthesis one for more. But I'll just briefly talk more about chemosynthesis here. So anywhere where there's no sunlight, there's no photosynthesis to provide energy. So animals have to rely on something else, which is chemicals that are naturally occurring in the ocean. So for example, this is a cold seep. This is a place where oil and methane gas naturally seep out of the seafloor. Cold seeps occur all over the planet. in the ocean. It's the reason why we drill for oil in the ocean, because there are these huge reserves of oil and gas under the sea floor, and some of it just naturally bubbles out because there are cracks in the seafloor, and some of it just naturally seeps out eventually. So here you've got this whole little community existing. Bacteria take those chemicals, like from the gas, the methane gas, or the oil, or other things like hydrogen sulfide and things like that in the seafloor, and turn it into food for the animals that live there. And then the animals graze on that bacteria. So the bacteria are doing the work of like a plant on land. So here in this picture, we've got these oil coated gas bubbles. So these are bubbles of methane gas coated in oil. This rocky looking outcrop here is actually asphalt that's coming out and forming this kind of, they call it like an asphalt finger. This is not a very big picture. These pink kind of looking guys, pinky white, these are a worm. They're called a methane ice worm. They're only about 1 inch long. So if that helps give you a sense of scale, this is not a very big area in the, but the picture makes it look really big, but it's not, it's a very close up picture. So cold seeps, they're small ecosystems, but there are a lot of them in the deep sea. Here's a close-up of those methane ice worms. So that orange stuff that they're living in is actually frozen methane gas because of the pressure and the temperature in the deep sea. Sometimes the gas that comes out freezes into a solid, and then bacteria grow on that gas, turn that methane into food by converting it into sugars, just like how plants take sunlight and carbon dioxide to turn that into sugars that make them nutritious for other animals to eat. The bacteria are doing a similar thing through chemosynthesis, and then those methane ice worms are actually eating the bacteria off of the frozen methane gas. And they live and thrive in this environment. And I think they're a very weird, very cool creature. And we just discovered them maybe about 20 to 30 years ago using a remotely operated vehicle, which is what the Nautilus Live was using to explore those octopus. Here's another cold seep. These are, again, methane gas bubbles coated in oil oozing out of the seafloor. And then you can see some frozen methane gas on the underneath there. All of that orange is frozen methane gas. And then these are some deep sea mussels and cold seep tube worms, which are another kind of tube worm, kind of like I showed you with the hydrothermal vent worms. These are a tube worm that lives around cold seeps, and they also kind of have to live where a cold seep is to get that food source. All of this fuzzy white stuff is a bacteria, again, living on the chemicals coming out of the cold seep. And then the mussels also live and thrive on those chemicals as well. So they kind of form this little unique ecosystem. And then you might also see crabs crawling around, actually grazing that bacteria, kind of like a cow would graze on grass or something like that. Okay, so this is a sub on the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, about 1,000 meters, about 3,000 feet deep. You can see these are all those deep sea mussels that I showed you in the picture previous. And then this, right here off to the left side of your screen, is actually an underwater lake. So there is salty water that seeps out of the seafloor that is so salty and so heavy that it just sits on the bottom of the deep sea and forms these lakes and pools. And nothing can really live in it because it's too salty, but animals live right near it because of that chemosynthetic bacteria that is, again, living and thriving off of the chemicals that are in that brine pool, because brine pools are often associated with cold seeps as well. So they kind of go hand in hand. And so you've got these chemicals happening right there, and the bacteria are thriving on the chemicals, and then the mussels are living off the bacteria, and they form this like reef of mussels around this lake. It's very cool, a very unique ecosystem BBC has a great series, Blue Planet 2, and this picture is actually from the filming of that series. So they do a whole show about the deep sea, about brine pools and things like that. So all of this is actually in that series. You can check it out and watch it. It's excellent, very well done. I think it's a 7-part series. This person right here in the submarine in the blue shirt, that's my boss. She works for the University of Georgia. She was an advisor on the BBC Ocean Blue Planet 2 series. So go check it out, please, because it's very cool. All right, let's see. Whale falls are another source of life in the deep sea. When a whale dies, if it doesn't wash up on shore, it falls to the deep sea, and a bunch of creatures take advantage of that source of food. You have scavengers like sharks and eels and crabs, and they slowly work to eat a whale fall, and then the whole animal gets consumed in the deep sea, even the bone. So there's a special kind of worm that just lives on the bone of the whale, and they come in and take advantage of that, of the whale bones, and eat it. So you can have a complete whale that falls to the bottom, and it will be completely gone, eaten up entirely over a period of time. It can take a very long time to get that way, although not quite as long as you might think. Here is an actual picture of a whale fall. Sometimes it can just be a matter of months before those like bone-eating worms move in and start working on the skeleton, but the actual like flesh of the whale gets consumed pretty quickly. The Blue Planet series also has a great video on a whale fall, because they happened to stumble upon one, and they were able to kind of document that. So that was really cool. Okay, and then I do see a question. Sorry, guys. A question in the Q&A. Does anything eat the baleen in a whale fall? Yes. I mean, all of it gets eaten. I think those special bone-eating worms are eating the baleen as well, or something is grazing. They eat the entire whale. It is completely gone. It's very cool. Okay. So then the last thing I'm going to talk about is bioluminescence. So some deep sea creatures glow or produce light in some ways. And some of the reasons why, here's just a few to get you started. To be able to see, so they kind of act like their own flashlight. To talk to other animals that live in the deep sea. To help lure in food. To help confuse predators. There's something called counter illumination, which I'll show you a little bit about. And then also as like an alarm, like, hey, help, I'm being attacked. And so a lot of deep sea creatures make their own light, or have a bacteria that live in their body that creates light for them. So one of the things, like this deep sea shrimp, is actually able to vomit light. It's not actually like throwing up like you and I would throw up. It's kind of like expelling this substance in its body, and it squirts it out through its mouth. And that confuses the predator, who then tries to eat the light, and the shrimp swims away. So that is one interesting adaptation. Then this is an example of counter illumination. So this fish, I think it's a hatchetfish, is able to, it has these bioluminescent cells in its body on the underside. And so you can see, this is an under view of the fish on the bottom, and it makes it look different to a predator that might be below it. It makes it look a different shape. And also if there's any light coming down from above, it can actually work to hide the fish altogether, because then the light from above is shining, and then the fish is lighting up from the bottom, and so it just kind of disappears into the water. So it might disappear completely to a predator, at least disappear in the minds of something that's going to eat it. Maybe you and I would be like, well, we can still see you, but a predator wouldn't necessarily be able to tell. Okay, so that is all I have for you guys today on deep sea adaptations. There are definitely more, way more that I could share with you guys, but in the essence of time, I'm going to stop for today. But if you want to participate in more webinars like this, please visit our website, which is ECOGIG.org. There's a little slider at the top that shows pictures. This is the second slider that comes up. You can click that. It will take you to a web post all about all the webinars. I'm always adding more as I come up with them. If there's anything you would like to learn more about, please let me know. I will try and create a webinar about it. And then, like I've said before, our YouTube channel has all of the webinars on it from previous weeks. And if you ever don't want to do like a Zoom, you can always tune in live to our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to get notifications for that. So for now, I'm just going to wrap it up. I'll take any questions that you guys have about what I've talked about today, or if there's anything in general that you want to know about the ocean. And please feel free to email me if you don't want to ask a question. My email is ecogigoutreach@gmail.com. And with that, I will say thank you to everybody for tuning in, and please ask your questions now. And you can pop them in the chat if you have any. Otherwise, have a lovely afternoon, everybody, and thank you. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the chat. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will hopefully see you guys again.